Hey, what's up guys? Today I am back with another video. Today I'm going to be reading nurse story times from the internet. Today I am going to be reading cases from Quora, and the question prompt is, what are some crazy patient stories you've encountered as a doctor or nurse? So, of course, these stories do not belong to me. Full credit to the authors and the people that experienced this, and I definitely will credit them. So the first story is from Jane Uresti. In nursing school, we are always taught to reorient confused patients. That means to let them know what they think is happening isn't real, and then let them know what is. That makes sense on paper, but in the real world, it will do nothing but get you stuck in a patient's room for hours, arguing with them as to what is reality. Sometimes it's just better to get down on all fours, reach under the bed cooing, "Here, kitty, kitty," and remove the 7 invisible cats whose meowing has kept the little old lady lying in bed awake for the past 3 days. She's happy, you're happy. The only thing you need to figure out is what color bag you're supposed to use to dispose of imaginary cats in the hospital. Books say to reorient them. Reality says to humor them. 20 years ago, I was doing a short stint in level 1 trauma ICU when I came in to get report on my patients for the night. The nurse told me that one of my patients was a man, around 50, who was non-compliant, delusional, and aggressive. Non-compliant, delusional, and aggressive. Just my type. She told me that he had come into the hospital after being stabbed 8 times in the chest with a butcher's knife and survived. I mentally added, bad, but to his list of attributes and went in to see him for the first time. I introduced myself, told him I was going to be his nurse for the night, and he immediately took a swing at my face. I had been in the caring profession for long enough that I could dodge a punch like Mike Tyson. Unlike him, I wasn't allowed to fight back. To be fair, his swing was weak, with the stab wounds and his arm tethered by IV lines. "Female dog," he hissed at me. Under 2 minutes, not bad. Maybe even a personal best. Most guys like to take the time to get to know me before they call me that, I said pleasantly, still out of arm's reach from him. He looked at me in shock for a second, then confused, he said, "What do you want?" "I would like to examine you and see how you're doing. Are you in pain? Do you want some pain medication?" Usually the offer of narcotics made people happy and eager to cooperate. "Don't you touch me! I'll kill you!" His eyes looked wild. Okie dokie, this was going to be a fun 12 hours. I tried another tactic. "Why don't you tell me what happened to you?" "I told the doctor. Ask him." "I know, but I'd rather hear it from you." Hoping that getting him open might start a dialogue or at least keep him from trying to strangle me with my own stethoscope. I had already determined that he wasn't just an angry middle-aged man. This guy had a serious mental illness. I had worked psych for 4 years as a student before changing to ICU. One of my jobs had been in a lovely place called crisis intervention, where cops would drag in psychotic men that they had caught running naked down the median strip on the highway. We also talked people off bridges, so I figured I was well equipped to deal with him. He appraised me, and I tried to look interested and non-judgmental. I finally had just enough of them, you know? Them? He gave me a disgusted look, like I should know what he was talking about. "The people in my head!" he shouted. I nodded. "The people in your head? They yell at you? They shout all the time? But it gets worse at night, right? When you close your eyes? Not even putting your hands over your ears helps," I repeated back to him, almost word for word what one of my former schizophrenic patients had told me. His eyes widened with surprise. "You know!" It was a revelation. I nodded again. "Yes, I know. So, you wanted to quiet the shouting. Tell me what you did." I decided that if I killed myself, they wouldn't have to yell at me anymore, and it would screw them over good. Solid plan. I felt agreeing with him would be the best. "Yeah, but I thought if I tried to do that, then they might try to stop me." "Quite possibly. Go on." "So I took a butcher's knife and convinced my sister to stab me with it." I had no answer to that, so I just kept looking very interested. "Uh-huh." He began reliving the story. She didn't want to. I had to scare her, but she finally took the knife and started stabbing me. He showed the action with an invisible knife in the air, stabbing himself weakly in the chest. His face grew angry. After 3 stabs, I snatched the knife for her and said, "Female dog, you're too stupid to even know how to stab a man, right? This is how you kill someone." His invisible knife stabbed harder over his chest. I tried to keep my face neutral, but the thought of someone plunging a butcher knife into their chest, pulling it out, and plunging it in again, and again, and again, 5 times, made my hand involuntarily go over my own chest. He was watching me carefully, looking for my reaction. I knew I had to be cautious with my response. "Well, you sure showed her, didn't you? I bet she'll never make that mistake again." He looked surprised, then vindictive. "I sure did." He smiled like the cat who ate the canary. He peered at me closer. "What did you say you wanted to do to me again?" I risked stepping forward, ready to jump back if he tried to hit me again. "I want to examine you, listen to your lungs and heart, and maybe take a peek under the dressings to your chest to make sure your wounds look all right." He nodded slowly. "Okay, but just you. I've had these other female dogs come in here all day, but I don't want anybody touching me." "No worries. It's just you and me for the next 12 hours. I'll keep you safe." I tried to put a trustworthy face on. "I think you will." He leaned forwards to me. I kept myself from stepping back. "Those other female dogs think I'm crazy," he whispered, looking at me with those crazy eyes. I nodded. "That happens sometimes." "But not you. You get me. You really understand." "Yeah, I get you. You and we're gonna be okay tonight. Just don't try to hit me again, okay?" He smiled. "Nah, I won't hit you. Did you mean it about those pain meds?" "Absolutely. Give me a minute to check you out and I'll get you some morphine." He nodded and leaned back against the pillow. A few minutes later, I left his room and bumped into another nurse. "Did he let you assess him?" I smiled. "Yes. He hasn't let anyone touch him since he woke up from surgery yesterday." "Maybe I'm his type." She laughed. "If by his type you mean bad, crazy like him, maybe you are." I didn't care. We were gonna have a good night. So that's the end of that story. So that's scary. I mean, again, I just finished my 2nd year of nursing school, so I haven't had any patients kind of like that. But I would be scared. I'll be really scared. But I guess if you've been on like a psych ward for like 4 years, then you probably understand and know how to deal with situations like that. That's wild. Okay, so the next story is from Christopher Fox. It seems like he was a doctor though, which is fine. So here's his story. True story from residency. Real name changed. His name was not James Frank, and this happened 30 years ago, so he may have passed away. I, as a junior resident, was called to the ER for a pedestrian struck by a car. The patient reported was the patient that was called James Frank. He had a broken left tibia and a broken left wrist. So I go to the emergency department, room 6, which is our orthopedic trauma room, and introduce myself to the patient, and he gives me a name of Ezekiel Youngblood. The x-rays said James Frank. So I went back to the patient who had an unusual affect, like an emotional appearance, and to confirm his name and to make sure I had the correct patient. The patient looks at me and says, "Yes, my name is James Frank, but James Frank is not the name of a righteous dude, and I have decided to become a righteous dude. So my name is now Ezekiel the Youngblood, because that is the name of a righteous dude. Being a righteous dude means that I cannot look to the left or turn to the left." Me? "Well, Ezekiel, if you turn to the left, what do you do?" He says, "I turn to the right, then turn to the right, and then turn to the right again." The car hit me came from the left. After a few more questions, I'm pretty sure Ezekiel is schizophrenic, but is competent to make his medical decisions. So I explain that we need to straighten up his tibia fracture and his wrist and place a cast. I get consent and offer sedation, telling him that the procedure would be quite painful. He says, "I need no more pain medications." "Are you sure?" "Yup." So I do the close reduction of the tibia fracture and put on a long leg plaster cast. Ezekiel does not scream, but there are beads of sweat on his forehead. "Are you sure about the pain medicine?" "I don't feel no pain." So next I straighten out his wrist fracture and put a plaster long arm cast on his broken wrist. Order post-reduction x-rays, which looked fine, and order his admission for observation for a compartment syndrome of the left leg in a psych consultation. Many of those words I do not know yet, such as compartment for compartment syndrome of the leg. The next morning are staff rounds. We have our staff, nurses, and medical students, residents, and physical therapists. After I present the patient's case in the hall and show the x-rays on our portable board, we proceed in to see the patient. I look at Ezekiel, and the lower portion of the cast over his wrist and hand are missing. Chief orthopedics say to me, "Dr. Fox, is that how you put on a long arm cast?" "No, sir, it was a full long arm cast last night." "Ezekiel, where did the rest of your cast go?" Ezekiel with a big toothy grin with plaster all around his mouth. "I don't rightly know." Me to the chief. "I think we will overwrap the next one with fiberglass to make sure that he has that consult before he leaves the hospital." So Ezekiel gnawed that part of his cast off for no other reason than his schizophrenia, and his schizophrenia caused his injuries. That's really sad. I mean, I'm glad that they did a psych consult before he left the hospital, but yeah. I wonder what happened to him. I think I have time. I'm going to do one more story. So this is from Diana Arneson. She was an RN. One story that comes to mind that happened to me many years ago when I worked on a medical unit. That night, I was assigned to an elderly woman with a cardiac issue. Unfortunately, as every night shift nurse knows, sometimes elderly patients in the hospital experience sundown syndrome, which means they become disoriented and agitated at night. This can happen even to patients that seem absolutely lucid during the day. On this particular night, I heard a noise indicating that the patient was out of bed. This was days before bed alarms, and went into her room with another nurse to investigate. The patient, who was very unsteady on her feet, had shakily gotten out of bed to use the commode. As we walked in, she screamed, "Get out of my house!" I said, "You're in the hospital, Mabel," not her real name. "Remember, we're just here to help you." "Get out!" she screamed. Apparently she thought she was in her own home at night, and we were criminal intruders. She grabbed the first thing that she could think of that would serve as a weapon, a wad of dirty toilet paper. Ew. And started chasing us around the room with it and waving it in our faces. The biggest concern here was the patient's unsteady gait. We were very concerned that she would fall and injure herself, so just walking out wasn't an option. Whenever we moved towards her, she would brandish that dirty toilet paper in our faces. My coworker collapsed on a chair, laughing her head off. I scowled at her and called security. I didn't know what else to do. As a security officer walked in, the patient lurched towards him, waving the toilet paper at him. Unfazed, he grabbed her arm and said, "Drop it, ma'am." To her surprise, she dropped it. I think she noticed his uniform and figured he was a police officer coming to save her from the two criminal trespassers. She quietly got back into bed and went to sleep without further incident. The next day, she was back to her old self and remembered nothing about the toilet paper chase. I wonder if she was working in long-term care, because that definitely... Oh, maybe she said in the beginning. It was a medical unit, but that's so interesting. I mean, long-term care is a breed of its own, but working on a medical unit, I'm sure that was a little bit unexpected, I guess. I guess depending on the amount of, the patient age that they generally have, but yeah. So I really appreciate you listening to those 3 stories from Quora. Please like the video if you liked it, so I'll know to do more. Please comment if you have any links to any stories or have any crazy stories that you'd like to share. I would love to do another video like this. So yeah, please subscribe. I would really, really appreciate it. To all of my current subscribers, I really, really appreciate you. You guys are awesome. And yeah, so I will see you in the next video in a couple days. Bye.